Okay, so I think it's time to start. Welcome everybody to today's webinar about the corporate impact on policy and society by Mr. Andrea Boccuni. And we hope you enjoyed today's webinar. Again, it will be recorded and posted soon to our channel in case you want to look at anything up or would like to know any details still. Thank you for joining, and I will give now the word to Mr. Boccuni.
You can call me Andrea. So thank you, everyone. Again, thank you for your time. I have the pleasure, and so again, thank you for Rotaract and thank you for Lauren for giving me the chance to address you in this very interesting, smart lecture. As some of you might have understood, this is part of a cycle of lectures. So in the previous one, we discussed what's the role of lobbying in the EU, mostly drawing from my experience as a professional lobbyist here in Brussels. And today I wanted to take the opportunity to talk a bit more about these corporations. The objective of today is to provide some food for thought. I'm not a professor professionally. I'm not here to talk you down or to tell you what the world is like. I think you are more than perfectly able to make it yourself. However, I will try to be provoking. I will try to be as thought-provoking as possibly I can be, because I think it could be interesting for the kind of decision you will be taking soon as a student and as soon to be entering the job market, but also as a citizen and as interested participants of this society. This lecture will have a spin towards students and job seekers. I will substantiate this claim during the presentation, but this lecture will be less about what's the impact of corporation, because I think you have figured by now, and more of what can corporation do for you. Rules for the webinar. This webinar is being recorded, so you can always go back to that. I'll also share the slides. And this is just a personal pleasure, and bear with me only for that. I would kindly ask you to turn on your camera if you want. This is because otherwise it feels rather lonely. I'm in quarantine in Brussels like everyone else. So if you feel like it would greatly help me. Thank you guys. Also, I'll try to keep it as interactive as possible. I would like you to share your comments, your thoughts. If you think I'm going too far, if you think that I'm going in direction you didn't expect, don't hesitate, just unmute your mic and speak up, or just use the chat box. I'll keep it open right here so that I can be as responsive as I can be. Quickly on myself, my name is Andrea Boccuni. I work for a big chemical company, a German company called BASF. I work in the public affairs domain. Before this experience, I worked in the European Parliament. I also worked in the European Commission in DG Sante. But first and foremost, I'm a lobbyist. I've been trained as a lobbyist, and I'm passionate about the world of lobbying in general. This is why every time I have an opportunity to teach in universities or MBA courses, I take it. And that's in my capacity of corporate lobbyist. Next to that, I've been working very much with NGOs for almost 4 years of my life at The Good Lobby, which is an organization I presented in a previous lecture. But there is also something else that I do in my spare time. And yes, I have a sad life. That's why I have so many other activities. I am a mentor at Team for Jobs, which is an organization that helps job seekers in looking for jobs. This is a government-led organization. It's paid by the Commune of Brussels. And usually this is one of the platforms that provides me with young, talented, capable juniors or students that want to work in Brussels. So in this capacity, I have the chance to working closely with students for, I think, 2 years right now. And one of the things that really got me interested in this topic is the fact that every time I meet a student, beginning, maybe a bachelor student or a master student or someone that just finished university, every time this person wants to come and work for Brussels, and I ask, what would you like to do? What profession would you like to pursue? No one answers corporation. Everybody wants to work in NGOs. Everybody wants to work in European institutions, but no one necessarily wants to look at the private sector. So that got me interested, because I thought this is somewhere where a young, profession I would like to start normally. So I understand that maybe a corporation have a bad reputation, but I would like to try to understand why. And this is a bit the spirit of this conversation. I want to be really just a conversation, and I think the best way to start is, in fact, to ask you directly what you think. So I will kindly ask you to move to menti.com. You can do so via smartphone or just your laptop. You open in another tab, and you come in with the code 7411688. And I will be following you from my presentation right here. So let's start from the beginning. For you that joined this webinar is because possibly you saw the advertisement and you saw that we were talking about corporations. What came up to your mind when you saw that word? What do you think of when somebody talks about corporation? Just for my understanding, how many of you follow a business administration course? Or put more simply, what are you guys studying? Feel free to use the chat box. I suspect BBA is business something administration, right? Okay. I love this answer because, I mean, you are, I think you have a better understanding than I do of what a corporation is or does. Okay, fair enough. So I think the word that comes more, it's money, profit, business, big institution, businesses, companies, wealth, globalization. Interesting. The lobbying part is very interesting. I find it fascinating because in the way I see it, governments lobby way harder than corporation ever could. But of course, because of this trend of spectacularizing lobby as an American exercise, it feels that only companies do. Very well. Next question. In your next job or in your future career, what are the most important aspects that you would like to see in your profession? You can rank them from 1 to 5 to 6, or just to choose the one that are more important for you. This is a business class. I love it. Perfect. I gather there's no many scientists in this virtual room. Very interesting. If I would do it, my first one would be possibility to travel. Then I will put work-life balance. Then I'll put responsibilities, then purpose, then money, then scientific preparation. Okay, this question is actually a no-brainer. I had a strong feeling that you would all write something about purpose, because this is also the feedback that I received from students anyway. Can any of you, or does any of you feels like quickly explaining what she or he means by purpose and impact? I know I put it generally on purpose, so feel free to go anywhere with your answer if you feel like answering. You can write in a chat or just speak up. What does purpose means to you? Don't be shy. No one?
For me, it would mean that I'm, with my work, doing something that is making the world like broadly a better place, kind of. So that I wouldn't feel like I'm cheating people or leaving things worse than they are.
Okay. Thank you, Lauren. I also see being part of something that is bigger than myself, knowing that I'm working in a team and empowering other people. Okay, so sense of purpose has to do with sense of belonging, perhaps, the fact that you want to feel like you belong to something greater. Okay, I'll take it, I'll leave it just right there because we're gonna go back to it. How transparent are corporations? What do you think? Very well. I really thank the person that said, I have no idea. I always like honesty. Very well. That's a very good point. In the previous class, for those who were there, I tried to make a case for the fact that, for example, the EU as a political object is possibly one of the most transparent system there are there. I would argue that obviously corporations are not bound to transparency. They're not necessarily bound to be transparent 100%, mostly for commercial reason. But I would also say that they are somehow transparent, mostly corporations or companies that are closer to consumers. So where the eye looks more, the more corporation will do a better job. Think, for example, at food companies. Food companies did a fantastic job in trying to be closer to you. If you use a QR code on certain product, you can see the whole supply chain. So, for example, in the Netherlands, there are many brands that allows you to see the where the product is coming from, how sustainable was that product, and what were the steps to that. Other products tend to be way less transparent, and so the corporation they're behind. Think of fashion. Think of the apparel industry. Think of Zara. You wouldn't normally expect from Zara a certain level of transparency. You don't necessarily want to know where is that cotton coming from or what's behind that specific product. So it's really depend on the sector. Another question. I don't want to say that I'm an Elon Musk bitch, but I really like the guy and I follow his biography and I think he's exceptional. Of course, as many others, but in particular, I was really surprised and shocked by his way of doing business. He started with Solar City. He used that money, the money that he had from PayPal, to found SpaceX, and then he went into Tesla. Some people see in people like Elon Musk the same way in which some people 10 years ago look at Steve Jobs, as a new way of approaching corporation, as a way in which corporations interact with society. Okay. I love there is no. Thank you. And I think it's fair. And would anyone feel like sharing why he or her is not sure about Tesla?
Personally, I'm not sure because I have the feeling they did a great marketing, but I'm not sure that the marketing reflects really what they think of what they want. I'm thinking maybe they want profit, and I think a marketing with the best image should be that way, and that's the way we see it.
Well, luckily, I'm addressing a class of business administration students, but is profit so bad in and out of itself? Because without profits, you don't have a company.
Yeah, but it's more like profit for profit and not profit for...
So the intention behind the profit is more important than the impact than the company produce.
I don't know.
Because the case I'm trying to make is, what about companies that are actually doing good? How about companies that provide wind energy machinery? Think of Vestas, one of the biggest corporations in the energy field from Denmark. They do wind turbines. They've been one of the ones to put and to place wind turbines in front of the Denmark Sea, in the North Sea, to produce electricity. Would they be good or bad? And I think Tesla stays a bit in the same ballpark, because Tesla, there is a reasons why now BMW, Volkswagen, Hyundai another big corporation are investing so much in electric cars. They wouldn't have dreamt 10 years ago if it would have been for the push that Tesla induced into the market, because at the end of the day, yes, they are a profit for profit. Now, name 3 corporations you like. Very good. Interesting. Ben & Jerry is a brand. It's not a corporation per se, but I like the answer. Yeah, this is why I mentioned Steve Jobs. I think this aura of magnificence that Steve Jobs had in some ways translated into the work of Apple. Thank you for Oxfam. They could be technically a corporation according to some definition. Indeed, they are a non-governmental organization. AB InBev, that's definitely a corporation. For those who don't know, AB InBev are the biggest producers of alcoholic drinks and beer in the planet. They are a Belgian company. I love this answer. Can someone justify or explain me why you like Apple?
Well, for me, I really like them because of their design, the design they have in their products, and the creativity and innovation that goes behind them. I know lately maybe they've been slacking off, and they do get a lot of criticism because there are other brands like Huawei or Samsung that they've shown to be strong competitors, but I think especially in the past, Apple really pushed the industry further, and I personally really enjoy their designs. So overall,
your customer experience satisfies you. You're a happy consumer. You like their products, and you're fine with it.
And I know that their products are very expensive, and they do get a lot of criticism for it. But after all, indeed, the consumer experience. I don't get the same experience with other brands personally.
And I don't get the same experience with other ice creams. So I do like Ben & Jerry's more than others. So that's absolutely fair. The beers, oh my God, who said that? Fantastic answer. Very well. Another question, would you ever work for a corporation? That's an open-ended question. That's not a yes or no, so you can motivate your answer. Marina, would you like to work for Apple, in fact?
I've always wanted to work in their advertising and creative advertising, but I kind of shifted lately. I would prefer more of an international organization.
For example?
Maybe NATO or Commission, but at the same time, I am very interested in the food industry as well. Okay. So you can tell my interests have shifted quite a lot.
No, of course. That's exactly the moment in your career and life where you should be open to new ideas. So no wrong with that. Okay, I see a bunch of yes. No one. Interesting. That's a very interesting answer, because someone would argue that the way in which, to try the concours and enter the European Commission, it's 10 times harder than getting to Apple. But this is a comment that I get often, the fact that people think that it's super hard. Perfect. Entrepreneurship, that's also part of your curricula. This answer is possibly the one I would aim for. And this is something that I chose also for myself. I had the chance to work in different kind of environment when I started my career, NGO, academia, the European Parliament, and other institutions, but I never felt I learned so much on the job than since in a work in a corporation. Okay, very well. And that's also a very important point, the fact that you have an international outlook. Okay, guys, thank you very much for your time and for your brain power. I think these are interesting elements to get to where we want to go. Very quickly, what do we mean by these words? In legal terms, corporation has a very specific meaning. That's not the way in which we will be discussing about corporation today. In a loose sense, we intend any company that is large enough to have a strong presence on several countries and a large number of employees. Technically, on paper, the European Commission considers a large corporation or large company anything bigger than 500 employees. But normally here we're talking about a few hundred or a few 100,000 or a few thousands. Also, there is a good, I think it's important to make a difference between what is a brand and what it isn't. For you guys, maybe this could be a no-brainer. You might have found that before. But of course, a brand is just a marketing tool that, you know, it's utilized to distinguish a particular set of products or a product line from something else. And it's not necessarily a corporation per se. Some of you, due to your study, might be connected to the concept of corporate social responsibility. I think it was very important for me because that is something that really characterized my development. I started my career 9 years ago in the NGO sector, and I worked with an organization that was working on the corporate social responsibility of corporation. Corporate social responsibility means that a company, because of its size and an impact, has an obligation, a moral obligation towards society to do something good with that. In that specific organizations, we were looking at sustainability of food supply chains. Did you know that the supply chain of pineapples is the easiest of all compared to other supply chain like saffron, passion fruits, or bananas? Pineapples are super easy exotical fruit. You put them in the ground, you wait 2 years, you take them out, they just come out of the flower, you wash them and box it, and you can just ship them away. Some organizations tend to have a very strong monopoly over those production lines. So for example, in the island of Mindanao in the Philippines, a company, in this case Chiquita, had a monoculture of pineapple, and organizations wanted to change the social status of workers on the field. After studies and studies, we figured out that talking to the government of Philippines was absolutely useless. And it was way easier to change things through the corporation itself. So we work very close to the corporation in a bit of campaigning versus legal battle. And we had them to change some of their code of conduct, especially in the way they treat workers. That translates in a very high impact. And I think that was one of the most important lessons I got from it, the fact that impact is somehow closer to who knows that sector. So corporations that act in a certain field might have a stronger presence and provide more impact than governments, NGOs, or international organizations. Now, this is a very old slide. Possibly it's a 10 years old slide, but I think it's possible that you might have bumped into slides like this. And sometimes they give you the feeling, you know, your head spins because it feels like that anything is a lie and they're lying to us. But in reality, we do work a lot with brands. So much so that consumers are so intertwined with certain brands that it gives a sense of belonging. You know, the difference between Google or Android's users and Apple users, Netflix versus YouTube, PlayStation versus Xbox. Brands also tends to define the way in which we portray our consumer behavior. However, that's not necessarily the end of the deal. We tend to know brands, but we might not know what's the story of those corporations. I think one of the best examples is Mars. Many of you might know Mars for those delicious chocolate bars, which I don't like that much, but I like the ice cream version. Not many of you would know that Mars had become the biggest producers of pet food in the world. Mars Incorporated, corporations do what they do, meaning they incorporate business that they are not their own to a point that the original business or brand might have completely forgotten. Some of you that are familiar with how Google works, you would know that Google isn't actually, it doesn't belong to Google, but belongs to Alphabet, which is a conglomerate that includes many kinds of association, including Google. What I want to say with this is that in the meantime, corporation became basically the R&D capacity of society. Many things that used to be state-owned, research and development, military advancement, studies on the population, studies on food behaviors or consumer behavior, had translated to corporation, which actually, it's one of the reasons why so much innovation comes from corporations themselves. The point that Marina made with Apple being one of the front runners in those years is a very good point. We used to think of artificial intelligence as the new normal, with states fighting each other with supercomputers. But the reality is that the biggest uses of artificial intelligence is Walmart. It's a grocery store. And you will find similar examples all over the world. One of the biggest incubator accelerator is in fact Unilever. They produce the best new products for those who want to enter the food market. So we came to a point where the role of corporation is so huge that we cannot pretend that they will not do it themselves. Another very good example in this area is SpaceX. Space exploration used to be something states do. Something states do so much so that an entire political career it was built on it. The Cold War culminated with the landing on the moon. Now this is something the private sector does. You have SpaceX, but you also have Blue Origin from the guy from Virgin, Richard Branson. So you will see with more and more parts of what used to be state-owned and state-like is now transferred to corporation, which is actually where also you want to look when you are looking for impact. So again, I might be a bit thought-provoking, but what I want to say in a nutshell, let's say I want to try to impulse with some elements. The first one is that corporations are the only non-state actors capable of generating high impact. If you are one of those who answer that wants purpose in your career or in your life, and then you want to do something more with your work, possibly, if you're really careful for your impact and if you really want that, you might want to work for corporations instead. This is where your impact gets actually transmitted in reality. And that means sustainability or impact all across the chain. So people, profit, planet, the triple bottom. So it's not just how workers are treated or how plastic is recycled and now Burger King has a paper containers. It's really all across the line. A second point I want to make that is connected to your comment that if I say corporation, you point lobby, states are always stronger than corporation. Even if we might have the feeling that, you know, Facebook is redirecting our life or Google decides and reads our email, the reality is that state always hold control. You could be Facebook, you could be easily having 2 billion users every day, but if the American Senate or the American Congress decides to put some serious law in defense of private data and the use of data, like we did Europeans with the General Data Protection Regulation, the whole business model of Facebook goes on and the whole business jumps off. You could be a huge producers of infrastructure and capacity, Huawei, but if for one reason the state decide that you are not in line with their objectives, for as big as you can be, you will crumble. So I like the idea, I play with the fact that lobbying is felt as a corporate prerogative, but the reality is that states are always bigger, they lobby hardest, and they use corporation on their behavior. Last but not least, which is something that some people tend to forget, maybe not in your case because you study business, people love brands. They really do. And there's nothing wrong with it per se. We live in an era of personalized marketing. This is what you see every day in your Instagram feed. That's personalized. Brands are the ancient version of trying to put people together in a lifestyle pattern. And people are really attached to those. So I think it could be interesting for you guys to go beyond brands and to see what are the corporations that are behind and how they move the brands and the position in the way they do. Okay, I feel like I've been talking too much. The ball is back to you. What do you think, from the bottom of your heart, what do you think are the top best place to work in Brussels? I say Brussels, I could have said Belgium, but you got what I'm trying to say. Feel free to use the chat box or just pick up. EU, NATO, definitely true. I asked for 10 names, by the way, not just 2. I mean, of course, I'm joking. Don't put 10, but feel free to elaborate. There's no right or wrong. Nothing? Very good. PepsiCo, Unilever, PwC, Big Four. Dylan, why do you think the Big Four are the best place to work in Brussels?
I think because I personally is linked into the financial consulting industry, and especially in Brussels, it is like the political center of Europe, and Big Four has quite a lot of impact on all the advisory consulting financial industry.
You made a nice point, indeed. You talk about finance, but Brussels is a political capital. So perhaps if we would be in Frankfurt, I would say you're right. Okay, Ernst & Young, the EU. Now, how many of you are familiar with the website Glassdoor? Okay. Okay. So Glassdoor, it's basically a place. Okay, nowadays it's a platform that offers many services. But what I think is interesting of Glassdoor is that it gives you an overview of which are the biggest companies that are active in your area, and also how do they rank compared to similar companies or corporations that are in similar fields. I think it's one of the most interesting websites, especially when you are about to choose your career, because it really gives you an overview and it gives you a panoramic eyesight on what's out there in the country you are looking for and for which purpose. Just to answer your question, most of you got it right. Some of the answers you gave are definitely in the top 10, but maybe you have you definitely don't see it coming to see what are the actual top 10 places to work. The top 10 places in Belgium, according to the user of Glassdoor, are the Parliament, followed by KU Leuven. Would you have ever imagined that? And actually, you can go and check for yourself and to see what employer, former employer, and current employer think of that workplace through anonymous reviews. P&G was also there, Procter & Gamble, European Commission as well, GSK. But then you have Proximus, ING, and Accenture. Accenture is possibly one of the best performing. It's not one of the big four. It's not necessarily about financing, but nothing sells better than digital transformation, and they do an amazing job, I must say. KPMG, of course. Then you have Telnet. Let's go through the list together. Deloitte, PwC, Kejeka, ICT service provider. I had no idea of this company myself. IMEC, nanoelectronics and nanotechnology. This could be interesting. Colruyt, of course. Toyota. That's something I didn't expect there. AB InBev, Engie, and so forth. So you see how even amongst the companies that you feel you know better, there could still be some hidden gems that could be interesting for the career you choose or the path you're choosing. Something that also Glassdoor does very well is to compare companies. So for example, you can go on the compare section. Maybe you can put Google, and maybe you can put Facebook. And you can compare the two. So you see which one is the best place to work in according to their employees. Career opportunity, work-life balance, culture and values, the CEO. You also see the average salary. Now, this I opened the UK version of Glassdoor because it's in English. I expected a conversation in English. But in fact, if you don't mind to move to the French section for Brussels, so at the very bottom you will find Belgique Français, or Dutch if you speak Netherlands. And you would also see the data and the stats that relates to the job in Brussels for Brussels. So, for example, I looked for myself to see what's an average, but a policy analyst in the region of Brussels, it's somewhere between 2K, with a higher end, somewhere around 4K, and maybe 1K for the loss. I think this is a fair estimate. I don't know how many review were needed to come up with such an average, but I stand by it. I think it's a fair representation of what it is. And you can also say how that relates to the same exact position, but in different places, whether you are a stagiaire in the European Parliament, whether you are a stagiaire or a contract agent in the European Commission, contract agents, temporary agents. Oh, that's interesting. That's a think tank, the European Policy Center. Hitachi, policy analyst, that's a fair salary for someone with 5 years of experience in public affairs. You also see what you would get in international organizations, and you can go on and on and on and on. The final point I want to make, and I think it's also interesting, is that you can also see how do companies hire. So you can see what is their interviews patterns. How do they get those interviews? Do they rely on online application? Do they rely on campus recruitment? Do they rely on employee referral? If you bring a new colleague to the job place, you might even be given €2,000 no taxes on. So these are all incentives that create and generates more visibility for the company. And you can also go through some of those interviews. Again, it might not be familiar, it might not be relevant to every one of you, depending on what are you looking for and which area you're interested in. But I think it's a good place to start. And it definitely gives you some, food for thoughts on companies or sector you might have not considered previously. Now, with this, I want to say that, example as the one that we've been discussing from Apple to SpaceX to Tesla are just another way to say that sometimes people have a bad feeling towards corporation, but the reality is that they are okay with it. They are okay with the way they sell. They're okay with some of the process they bring forward. And also some corporations are really putting an effort in doing the best they can to appeal to different ways to consumers. A good example is the company Patagonia, which has been leading environmental processes on recycling of the apparel sector. I think they were one of the first ones to do so. You also see, certain companies coming forward with political arguments. You saw in the Black Lives Matter discussion, companies like Adidas or Nike taking steps and taking the stand. But first and foremost, I think that working in a corporation is just a nice way to start a career. The reasons why I think so is because I had the opportunity and certainly the honor of working in different fields in a short amount of time. I'm not an expert myself, I'm a generalist. So I had the chance to work in different places for enough time to get a sense of what do they look like. I work in the parliament, I work in consultancies, I work in corporation, I work in university, I work for the commission. And I must say, of all these different places, the one that really professionalize you and really gear you up for your future are corporation. I'm not saying it because I want to sell that, it's mostly because of resources. All in all, I would say that of course there are pros and cons like everything else in life. I would say one of the best reasons to work for a corporation is resources, in fact. Resources is not just your straight salary. It is also the possibilities for you to travel, the possibility for you to go and meet colleagues abroad and not having to do a Zoom call. Now, of course, Corona came in and everything is Zoom call. But before that, and I'm pretty sure after this, by 2023 or 2024, we will go back on flying. And it's always nice to go and meet your colleagues in Singapore if you've been given a chance. I also would like to make a point on the education. I've been working in several places, but even when I was working in consultancies and even in consultancies that were doing very well, I always had to fight to have a stupid language course paid. In a corporation, that's not the case. I've been given 3 courses for free, blindfolded. So I started 3 courses, 3 language courses all of a sudden, and I thought I'm a nerd, and more knowledge is always better than less knowledge, so it was just fantastic for me. Something else that I really want to point out are colleagues. In my team, I'm the only non-PhD, and that really pushed my boundaries to have a better understanding of how the system works. I am honestly amazed by the quality of people around me. Also, those people will go and come and move around, and those people will stay in your network, whether you want to stay in a country or want to travel. That's also very interesting. The international outlook is one of the reasons why I choose a corporation. I've been working in European affairs for 7 years, and I was sick and tired of having to check what have the French said today, or what are the Lithuanians thinking of this policy, or what are the Portuguese, what's the Portuguese position on the common agricultural policy. We have a tendency of looking inward, especially in Europe, especially after Brexit. The world is huge. There are many things happening out there. It's a fantastic discussion taking place. I wanted to find a job that gave me that discussion. Last but not least, managerial and executive responsibilities. If you're interested in your career, especially if you're interested in managerial position, there's no better way than to manage directly as soon as you can. Managing doesn't just necessarily mean people, it means also managing budgets, managing resources, managing different kind of input coming from all over the world. I think this is very challenging and very interesting at the same time. Of course, everything comes with attachments. I think one of the comments I received the most is, people don't want to work in corporation because they feel small in a big machine. I must admit, I was lucky enough of working in public affairs. Public affairs puts you very close to the board. My boss is already a senior vice president, and after that you have the board and a CEO. So I don't feel small. I'm actually feeling that I'm entrenched, because we have a higher relations with the higher management, way more than other people in the company might have. So I don't have this feeling. But if you are a technical expert, if you're an engineer and you work for Rolls-Royce or for Airbus, I might get your point. You're just a little piece of the bigger machinery. Another comment I heard a lot is that I just don't want to make money for my CEO. And that's a very fair point. I'm not here to judge. I think it's also important to place yourself ethically in this discussion. At the end of the day, you're selling yourself. You need to be comfortable with your position. And then, of course, reputational issue. I don't think anyone wants to work with Monsanto anymore, but that doesn't mean that people wouldn't like to work for Bayer now that Bayer bought Monsanto. Or people might feel uncomfortable in working for Nestlé. But I think this is also somehow due to marketing, because any company, like any big things, has an impact that will spill over somewhere in some reasons, in some ways. So I think it's important to go beyond a good versus evil understanding of things and try to see what works for you. Last point I want to make before opening to a quick Q&A. If you're in Brussels and if you're looking for jobs in Brussels, do feel free to connect with Team for Jobs. I work for Team for Jobs. They've been super helpful with a lot of people. Just in case you feel that it's taking you too long to find a job, or if you want to find something that you're more interested in, feel free to connect to mentors. This is absolutely for free. I have a mentor I'm always with a mentee. And every time I finish with a mentee, Team for Job gets me another one. So I don't think I have ever been without a mentee for the past 2 years. It has been fantastic and enriching. So I think it could be interesting for you as well. Okay, that's all from my side. What do you think? Give me some comments. Feel free to jump on me at this point. Any questions or comments? Jason, any question?
I have a question. But I'm a first year, so it's long before I'm beginning to work in a real corporation. But do you think that after COVID-19, are there really going to be travels again to the international? And aren't we all going to be like in Zoom calls for the international aspect?
I don't have the crystal ball. I cannot give you a straight answer. My feeling is that COVID will be under control relatively soon. Not just because of the vaccine, but because of the economic consequences. So even bigger companies give an outlook of maybe another year. So let's say we will stay in a very similar situation at least until summer 2021. After that, we go back to normal. Not immediately, not everywhere, not at the same pace, but it's reasonable to say that we will go back to some level of normality to 2023, which is a bit of a difficulties for you guys that are entering the job market at this place, but you will be surprised to see that companies are hiring more than before COVID. And I think that's important to also factor in. It is more difficult to get certain position, but it's easier to access higher people than before.
Okay, thank you.
Do you think there is much scope for work in a corporation in Brussels speaking only English? Jason, I myself, I only speak English. I have a certain command of French and Spanish, but I can tell you my professional level is not as nearly as it should be. I especially work in English. Corporations are safe havens for English speakers. Of course, they're not the only ones, but I would say this is also one of the elements that I really like in my professional environment. The fact that I have multiple culture and input from all over the world every day. So yes, I really think it's very possible. I've done it myself. I've seen other people done it successfully. Clara, do I think if it's harder to get a job after doing Corona times? The reality is that it might feel more difficult, but I'm working with people and I'm following many students. It's easier now than before. First of all, because Corona created an incentive for some company to shake things a bit. So some people were laid off, some people were hired, some companies were restructured. All of a sudden, many companies had to deal with digital, which means that many companies finally found the right time to hire millennials. So my honest reaction is that no, I find now more applications and open vacancies than before. I myself, I changed job in Corona. I started this job in June. My application was froze from March to May because of Corona, and my hire had to be approved by the CEO. But nonetheless, I changed in Corona, and it wasn't necessarily more or less difficult than they would normally be. On average, when you start working a lot on your job seeking skills and preparation, it takes 3 months for the results to come in. To be really honest with you, I would love to talk more about this in the next session. So the next session, we will be talking exclusively on how to look for jobs, how to look for jobs in Corona time, and what are common tools to deploy. My feeling is that students are not given sufficient instrument to look for a job. I don't think in your course they tell you how to do a correct job interview, how to do a correct CV, how to send spontaneous applications. When I was looking for a job in 2014, I used to send 20 spontaneous application a day, every day for 10 days, and that makes 200. And I used to do phone follow-up for more than 200 companies, and I got a job in a month. But I don't know anyone that is so aggressive as I was at that time. But this is some of the ways or some of the way of working, the modus operandi that we can talk a bit more into depth the next session. Do we have any advice on how to differentiate yourself and stand out from others when looking for internship jobs, both in the private sector? Yes, each and every one of you is absolutely unique. The point is that some of you might think that in order to get a job, you need to fit into those little boxes called CV. That's wrong. People receive hundreds of CV every day. The more you can differentiate, the higher chances of success. But that has to go through what is your story? How are you selling yourself? So my answer to you, Marina, is yes, you can definitely build a short story for yourself. And we can discuss that more into depth next week, in the next session. Is there a process that should be taken to reach out to someone looking for jobs? No, just feel free to contact them if you feel like contact them. If you are close to when you are about to enter the job market, or if you think you want to receive support and help from a mentor for free. Do you think the prospect of working as an expat has been negatively impacted by COVID-19? That's a beautiful question. It depends on where are you from and what is your country of reference. Brussels is a safe haven for expat because there's nothing of Belgium in Brussels, so at least in the Brussels bubble, of course. I'm, of course, exaggerating. I think expat tend to score fairly well, especially expat like us. So educated with high university titles that are looking for some specific jobs. So yeah, I would think we can still make it, and COVID hasn't been as impactful on the job market as it's perceived. So I still think there is a fair chance. Do you see a benefit in doing unpaid internship? In other words, the experience work lack of a salary. I myself, I had 4 unpaid internships before finding my real job. That was also due to my specific biography. I started looking for jobs somewhere in between 2010 and 2011. There was 2 years after the economic crisis, so many companies were still recovering. I think today will be a bit easier. So yeah, unpaid internship makes sense if you have a plan. So if you want to become an expert in social security policies at NATO, having an unpaid internship with a member of the European Parliament can be functional and instrumental to that goal. Having an unpaid internship for the sake of doing something might not be the best choice, but it really depends what you want to do next. And I'm not sure that university give you sufficient tools on how to see your career in the midterm, meaning where do you want to see yourself in 3 to 5 years, which is not too far, it's not 10 years, but it's definitely longer than an internship that lasts 6 months or 1 year. Is a PhD detrimental when you try to get a job in the private sector? No, I would say the opposite. The PhD are high in demand, but not all PhD are the same. A PhD in law is not a PhD in electric engineering. A PhD in psychology is not a PhD in, I don't know, rocket science. So it depends which kind of PhD and how that fits your trajectory, how it fits your career path. Do we already have a fixed date for the next session? Yes, we do. I think, I don't remember when is it again, but I'm sure Laurent can tell you more.
Yes, this is on the 3rd of December at 5 o'clock again.
Could we also talk next time about applying for internship and also in general a bit about it? Yes, of course, specifically about language. If I don't speak fluent French or Dutch, is that an issue? Yes, if you're applying for jobs that require French and Dutch, it is an issue. Many other jobs do not necessarily require French and Dutch. They are meant for internationals. So you might want to look for those. It might restrict your field, but if you have a very specific idea where you want to go, that's not necessarily a bad idea. Again, I myself don't speak professional French and I don't have any Dutch. And that definitely restricted some of the position I could have opted for. But at the end of the day, if you're really driven, if you know what you want to work on, this is absolutely possible. Okay, I don't want to bore you too much. And actually, maybe what we can do is to support Rotaract and get support from Rotaract. So if you have any question, feel free to send them so that they can come up with a package and then we can address your specific question. At the end of the day, Rotaract is here to support you and to provide you with extra tool and extra support whenever you need it. So feel free to contact them anyway. I will leave you with 3 thoughts. And just feel free to do whatever you want with those information. It's just a bigger, broader sort of advice, but I don't want to patronize anyone. I would say consider working in a corporation. Consider, it doesn't mean go work for one, at least consider, see it for yourself. Be critical, be a critical thinker, see it for yourself. I think there are many interesting firms out there, but you are not necessarily exposed to them. You don't go look for corporation, you see brands. So take a moment to find those that you like. If you have a specific field you're interested in, if you're interested in energy, if you're interested in transport, if you're interested in trade, if you're interested in medical devices, find an area you're interested in, or a top 3 area you're interested in, and try to see which are the main actor in that specific area. Also try to go beyond good or bad. Good or bad is for elementary school. You guys are university students. You can do better than that. So if you're someone that goes for impact, ask yourself what impact means in real terms. Try to measure that. If you're going for positive impact, ask yourself what positive impact means, and try to go for companies and professional environments that support and encourage your personal ethical driven. And then, in a way or another, I would still say that corporations are the best professional gym. They get you professionalized fast, they have the resources, and they will educate you to a point that you are free to go away. You might be familiar with many management programs within certain organizations. Deloitte does it a lot. So there are specific programs that a student or an entry-level candidate can go through, and it's a fast lane to management. In 3 years, you do what a normal person would do in 5. So consider as a gym, not as a place for life. No job is for life anyway, but it's easier to start with the difficult one, because it then allows you to see what else out there. If you start in Facebook, it would be easier to go work for a non-corporation at that point. Now, I will ask you to think of your career strategically, where you want to be in 5 years, for example, but this is a very big question. So I don't expect you to have an answer, but perhaps you can think about it while we're waiting for the next session. And with this one, I thank you. Feel free to connect with me, with Rotaract, with Lauren, and with the guys. Feel free to write them questions if you have more, or simply if you have comments or something that you would like to see in the next session, like the point on internship. I'd like to take it on board. Also, feel free to add me on any social media platform you're interested in, especially if you're on LinkedIn. I work a lot on LinkedIn. And if you need support in looking for a job, or if you're looking for jobs specifically in the Brussels bubble, institutions, consultancy, or lobbying, feel free to call me. This is literally my ballpark. I feel very confident there. Outside the Brussels bubble, I'm a normal civilian like everyone else, but in this field, I feel rather solid. Thank you very much.